with African trade. Joining us now from our Cape Town studios to talk about Intra Africa trade in the light of the state visit is Willemien Viljoen. She's a researcher at the Trade Law Centre. Willemien, hi. We're not going to talk specifically Zimbabwe and South Africa, but it does give us the context for a conversation on Africa as a whole. And let's start with the practicalities. Whatever intra-trade activity there are formidable logistical obstacles, bad roads, bad officials, bad border posts, corruption. Not sure if Willemien could hear us there. Willemien, if you are listening to us, we've got, saying, lots of practical obstacles to intra-African trade, corruption and bad roads and obstreperous and difficult officials, just some of them.
Yes, no, that is correct. There are various barriers to trade that is currently obstructing trade within Intra-Africa. You've mentioned a couple of them, problems at the borders, your corruption, but there's a majority. A lot of the barriers of Intra-Africa trade relates to transport, your forwarding, your freight, as well as then your customs procedures, and also very specific limitations, for instance, having export taxes or having non-automatic licensing requirements. So there's a lot of barriers to trade that is currently constraining trade and competitiveness, on intra-Africa trade.
Well, I mean, no doubt there are these bottlenecks that you mentioned now, but is there anything tangible that's being done to ease these bottlenecks? We hear about the possibility of having electronic platforms at borders, of streamlining trade and tariff policies, and these are the kind of conversations we hear from the podium from different politicians. Is this filtering to the ground in terms of really making it easy to move people and goods across borders in Africa?
There is various initiatives that's ongoing. On the multilateral front, you've got various WTO agreements that is trying to get all the WTO members to adhere, for instance, to international accepted standards, so that you don't have varying standards when you want to import or export a specific product across borders. In terms on the regional front, there is various programs in place. Now, we start off with our various trade agreements where we've got our regional economic communities, and all these economic communities actually makes provision for mechanisms to try and reduce tariff barriers and also to try and eliminate them in the long run. However, these mechanisms have been relatively unsuccessful. So now a new approach has been to try through an online platform, like you said, through the tripartite free trade area negotiations, where you've got the EAC, COMESA and SADC actually trying to establish a free trade area among all 26 member countries. And they have now created an online platform where traders can actually go and they can report a non-tariff barrier that they've experienced, and then there's a specific procedure that actually has to be followed to try and address these issues. However, a lot of these platforms, especially the tripartite one, is an ad hoc and an ex post facto mechanism, which means that it addresses an NTB after your trader has already experienced it. So it's already incurred a cost, though that money is already lost to him, and it doesn't address a lot of the problems which is actually at the root. So it doesn't look at the root cause analysis of a lot of these barrier problems.
Well, I mean, I think it's been remarked before, a lot of the trade that Africa does is with former colonial powers, and you could argue with a new colonial power like China. So they're trying to get intra-trade going. If that pattern develops, where are the natural links going to happen? I mean, CNBC Africa, we talk every morning, for example, and every evening, West Africa, East Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. These would be natural trading partners, but they're a long way away from each other. Do you see clusters of countries starting to trade, or are we going to have the big boys trading with each other?
Well, at the moment, the thing is that it's mostly what you call the big boys actually trading within the country. So it's your South Africa, it's Nigeria, it's Egypt, it's Angola. Those are the countries that's responsible for most of the products flowing throughout the region. So if we're looking at, trying to increase intra-Africa trade, there's a lot of problems that will need to be addressed. One is, what are we producing and what are we trading? A lot of the African countries are still focusing on your primary products, your agricultural products, and that is what they are trading with one another. So in order to actually enhance your intra-Africa trade, you will have to see, but how can you create a supply chain? How can value addition take place in order for the possibility to be there, the potential to be there for products to be traded among African countries. So, and then you will have to see, so is these, is the increase in Africa trade, is it going to flow from, South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, Angola, and, include the rest of the countries around it? And I think, there's already been, you've got your free trade areas, you've got your customs unions, but still you have your major players within those. So it will also depend on what's happening with what's going to happen with the tripartite free trade area negotiations. Can we manage to get 26 countries,
yes,
from South to East Africa to actually form one free trade arrangement where you've got, relatively free trade amongst them? So are we then going to see that there is going to be a flow of investment and trade, and actually having a focus of looking at, trading with countries where in the previously they haven't been so important?
Okay.
Or is it going to be, if you establish a regional value chain, for instance, how can you get the rest of those countries actually, involved in all of these production and trading activities?
Willemien, thank you so much for that analysis. Willemien Viljoen is a researcher at the Trade Law Center.